Welcome back to 3 Point Firefighter, podcast where I have conversations with firefighters all around the country on all things fire service related, especially those three things that I think are the foundation for any good firefighter: pride, training, and physical fitness. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at 3 Point Firefighter. Also, my contact info will be down below in the description. I'd love to hear from you. So today's guest is Chief Peter Van Dorpe. Chief Van Dorpe has served 33 years on the Chicago Fire Department, with several of those years being in training. He also served as the Algonquin Fire District Chief, and he has taught literally too many classes for me to even list here. He recently participated as a subject matter expert for the UL research on structural stability of engineered lumber and fire conditions, NIST evaluating firefighting tactics under wind-driven conditions, and just the list goes on and on and on and on. I know Chief Peter Van Dorpe from the ISFSI. He is our current president. I had the honor to teach with him in Denver, and I could not wait to have him on my podcast one more time, but just sort of one-on-one. I really was wanting to pick his brain about a lot of things. I hope you enjoy this podcast, and with that, Chief Peter Van Dorpe. Chief Pete Van Dorpe, thanks for being on my podcast, brother. I really appreciate it.
Good morning, Jake. How are you doing today?
Doing well. So it's not like this is our first podcast together.
No,
we had
our second.
It's our second. We had a good one back in Denver with a whole bunch of people, but I feel like you're a very interesting character in the fire service and in the society. So I really wanted to kind of get you alone and kind of give me these higher views of the society and the programs.
Sure.
So before we get started, though, why don't you tell me a little bit about your fire career, how you got started, where you went, where you ended up?
So I got started in 1980 on the tail end of a labor action, otherwise known as a strike. My dad was on the job. I was on the list to be on the job, and the strike went down. My dad went out on strike with like 90+% of the rest of the firefighters. Interestingly enough, he was a battalion chief at the time. And as a consequence of him, and I think there were 4 other guys being out on strike, the union did the right thing and wouldn't go back in unless the chiefs were included in the union. So to this day, battalion chiefs are in local 2 along with firefighters and fire officers. Oh, anyway, I come on the job, after a big part of the reason for the strike was nobody was getting hired, nobody was getting promoted, and they didn't have a binding agreement was really the big thing. But they were running, this is in the, late 70s, obviously 1980. They're running 3-man engines, in the busiest parts of the city. You got guys, no officer, no engineer, everybody's acting up. Nobody's getting paid to act up. My dad would act 2 ranks above. As a captain, he would act 2 ranks above routinely, not get paid for it. And this just went on and on and on. So as my dad likes to put it, it wasn't a strike, it was a revolution. And they won, and as a consequence of that, there was a whole lot of hiring. So I got scooped up in that whole lot of hiring, and thus begins my career coming in with this division in the fire department and all that stuff, which took about 10 years to begin to resolve itself, and maybe another 10 to really resolve itself. You had to divide between the strikers and the non-strikers and the guys that took the job during the strike and all that. So let's just say it was an interesting time to enter your career on the fire department, particularly in the city of Chicago. But I did have the big advantage of not just having a dad on the job that was well respected, but who stood with the men, and they were all men at that time, on the picket line, right? So I sort of got that free pass in a sense. And I cashed it a couple of times, right? I'd step on myself. Let's just leave it at that. And but I got a break because I was Freddie's kid, and that taught me a lot. That taught me a lot about reputation and earning reputation and all that sort of stuff, and the value of that, right? Nobody ever forgets anything on the fire department. Every move you make gets remembered, so you better be careful about what moves you make. Anyway, so
now, how long did that strike last?
It was 23 days.
Okay.
And one of the coldest Februaries on record. They went out on February 14th, 1980. And it was pretty brutal. So, if you might still see him around. In fact, just celebrated the 40th anniversary. So a lot of this stuff got reprinted, they called it the Brotherhood of the Barrel. because it being so cold, they were all picketing outside the firehouses, and they all had the 55-gallon steel drums with the, scrap wood in there to keep warm, right? So they were all standing around the barrel. So you had the Brotherhood of the Barrel. And to this day, that's like the symbol of the guys that went out on strike.
So, I guess it was a lot of division when it was all said and done, those who went on strike and those who didn't.
Yeah, it was, it's interesting because in hindsight, it was kind of unique. There were guys that were forgiven. There were guys that were willing to forgive. It might have taken them a little time. There were guys that would not speak to anybody for the remainder of their career that was a striker. And they were just adamant. They were scabs. They were not going to talk to them. There were guys that, so for instance, you go out, day number one, you go out, right? And there might be, and there was a large handful of guys that really didn't know what they were going to do. And it took them a couple of days to come out. And believe it or not, there were some hardcore guys that said, if you weren't out for the whole 23 days, I don't want to talk to you. So, and those were few and far between, but you really had you had some really hardcore, in this day and age, we call them haters, right?
Right.
But they just felt so strongly about, because they didn't just wake up one morning and say, hey, I think we'll go on strike, right? This took a decade to develop. So there were some very, very strong feelings on both sides, really, but primarily on the side of the strikers. And they were very successful. Nobody believed that they would get 90+% of the firefighters out,
Oh,
and
my
they
goodness.
did, and they stayed out. Very few guys went back in. And so it was very interesting. And it really, when you think about it, right, one day you've got no officers, the next day technically you've got officers, but yesterday they were firefighters. And we're not, and that's always true, but it's always a small percentage of the fire department. This was a large percentage of the fire department were, newly minted officers. And they weren't newly minted in the sense they'd been acting up for years, in some cases decades.
Right.
But when you just think about this, right, your typical lines of authority, you've got all these battalion chiefs that were out on strike just a few days ago. Where are their sympathies going to be?
Right.
Not with the administration, right? And that lasts a long time, and it takes a long time for anything like an administrative respect, if you will, to redevelop, right? You eventually had to be promoting some of these strikers into those administrative positions before, so it was a generational thing. That's the interesting thing about it. And it was a really good lesson for me, because when you're talking about change in the fire service, okay, how long is it going to take you to get over this strike? It's going to take a generation. Wow. Big, important things like that take a generation to completely resolve themselves.
Now, the International is no longer a striking union. So was that one of the last strikes, do you think, that actual walkouts?
Yeah, there was only a few after that, I think. And I don't think there was any in cities anywhere near as large as Chicago. You got to remember, we didn't have a bargaining agreement to begin with, right? So, it was a handshake. So, they tried to fire everybody, but the courts had a different take on all that, and as a result of the collective bargaining agreement, we had binding arbitration, which precludes, that's why, we've precluded the strikes. You got binding arbitration.
So you get scooped up in that mess. You're now a Chicago firefighter.
Yeah. We get through all that. I'll be frank. I'm a good test taker. I don't know that I'm all that good a firefighter. I'm a good test taker. I made, I got on a busy truck and I learned a few things, but I made engineer within 7 years. So I was only a firefighter for 7 years, made engineer. And that was, again, good advice. Someone said, no, you want to take this job because then you'll study really hard for lieutenant, because you're, a young guy, you're not going to want to do this for the next 25 years. And it was true. So I make an engineer. I'm just driving now. But I studied real hard for lieutenant. 2 years later, I made lieutenant. So I'm less than 10 years in, I made lieutenant. And then did that for a long time. Don't ask me to keep track of all the years. I'm going to forget. But a long time. And one of the cool things about, in hindsight, again, about lieutenant, anytime you get promoted in Chicago, we call them relief pools, because it's relieving, right? And so you don't have a permanent assignment. You're just covering for people on their days off. So you hit a different house every day, or maybe you cover a vacation. But I had a really good route. I was hitting the 13th and 14th battalions. Now they've changed all the numbers, but that was the West Side. And at the time, 13 or 14. And so I was getting a lot of fire duty and working with a lot of good guys. So I wasn't really motivated to put in for a permanent spot. You bid your spots by seniority. So if I bid a spot, I wasn't going to get anything as good as I was getting by relieving. So I just kind of hung out as a lieutenant relieving. And then when I made captain, I got my first permanent assignment, which was around 1990 something. Engine 23. It's in Pilsen, very Mexican neighborhood, sort of like the port of entry in the city for the Mexican immigrants. Mm-hmm. Not as busy as the West Side, but we did enough to keep our heads up, and walked into a great company with a really strong captain on the truck. And so I had, I didn't have anything to fix. I just had something to maintain. Mm-hmm. I had a great group of guys. And that's really where I kind of started. During my time as lieutenant, I'd gone down to the academy twice to work with recruit classes with, we call them candidates, working with probies. So I had that experience, twice prior to that. And then the whole thing with training really, when I became a captain, is when I really got into this whole thing, because guys started studying. There was another engineer's exam coming up, and guys kept coming up to me on the company, both on my shift and other shifts, with, hey, Cap, what about this? Hey, Cap, what about that? So I said, all right, enough of this, right? If I'm going to do this all day long, it's going to be on my term and my time. So I started organizing study groups on my company for the engineer's exam, and then subsequently for the lieutenant's exam that came right after it. So that's kind of when I got really hot and heavy into the whole thing of not just training on occasion or training on the company level, but training in a broader sense, training career-wise, right? And really everybody at my company that was part of that study group for lieutenant eventually got promoted off that list. So
they got to piggyback on your good test taking abilities.
Well, and I kind of, what it is, and we don't have time for it right now, but I had the system down. I understood, there's all this, and it's a shame because there's all this mystery about, how what's going to be on the test and how to do well and what you're supposed to do. And really it's just all basic, good study skills and good test taking skills, which are easy to learn if you put your mind to it. And that's what I focused on. I said, look, guys, look at the old test. They're telling you what's going to be on the test. It doesn't change. If you just go through the list and mark it all out, yeah, they give you 120 different general orders to study, but every test that they've ever given, they've only used 25 of those orders. I'm not telling you not to read the other ones, but make sure you read these 25. Right?
Yeah.
And there's guys that, they'll fool you, they'll do that. Nah, they're going to repeat the same pattern. And it's a long story. If you know anything about test development, you know why. But it's easy to find out if you put your mind to it. So that's what we focused on. And yeah, the guys did well. They worked really hard and they did well. So
it sounds like you might have screwed yourself because you had a good group of guys that now have tested and promoted out, and you had to get a whole new group.
Well, yeah, kind of, sort of. They didn't go out that fast, I mean, it's a bit, especially lieutenant, right? There's 2,000 guys will take a lieutenant's test in Chicago, and they only give them about every 8 years, 7 or 8 years. It's crazy.
Oh, really?
So that list hangs up for a long, long time. So they got to go through. They'll go through however many hundred they go through, but it takes a long time to get through it.
Oh wow! I had no idea they did it that long.
Yeah. They always say they're going to change it, but they always see that. Now the state of Illinois has a statute that says you got to test every 3 years, but the state of Chicago is exempt from that rule. So
the state of Chicago.
Yeah, that's most legislation in Illinois exempts the city of Chicago. I shouldn't say most, but a fair amount of it exempts the city of Chicago. It's called home rule. Yeah. Oh. So anyway, I flubbed my first battalion chief's test. Not sure why. I didn't do good on my oral. Like I said, I always tested well, but I didn't do good on the first oral. Kind of flubbed it. Nobody's fault but mine. I just flubbed it. Mm-hmm. And so I had to take a battalion chief's test twice. But by, what was it, 2000, I'm battalion chief. So 20 years on the job, and I'm battalion chief. Managed to make my way back out west after a while. By then I got some seniority. I could bid on a spot. Got back out on the 14th. Spent a little bit of time downtown, 4th Battalion, mm-hmm. which is on the edge of downtown. And that was a really good experience because I got to do some high-rise firefighting as a battalion chief. And I worked the 1st Battalion, the downtown guy was Keith Witt. Really, really good battalion chief, really, really good at high-rise firefighting battalion chief. Managing that complex mess that a high-rise firefight is. Keith was really good at it. And then that whole high-rise experience. So we had a high-rise fire that went south Cook County building, 25 West Washington, I think the address was. Anyway, at the time it was, and 6 people died in the stairwell, and we didn't find them till after it was all over. So this became a big to do, and we basically had to rewrite our whole incident command for high rise as a result of it. It was the right thing to do and what we did. And then I got scooped up into that to do the training because we trained the whole department in a very short period of time. So that was like my second big oomph in training, was going through that. And that got me on the radar screen because we the way we did that was through the Illinois Fire Service Institute. It was just a way of making it happen faster. And a little less expensive. And so that's when I started teaching with them. And don't ask me what year it was, but it was after 2000. So maybe 2002, 2004, something like that. I started teaching for the state on a pretty regular basis. Did the battalion chief for a long time out on the west side. But the thing, as good as that west side is, my thought after a while was, as a battalion chief, it became my job, became saying, good job, guys. Good job. I mean, they're just so good at what they do. They do so many fires and they're so good at what they do. There's no real challenge for a battalion chief. So I was looking for that reason and for other personal reasons to maybe move back downtown, get a battalion that was in or near downtown, because that's a bit of a more of a challenge for a battalion chief when you get those incidents, right? They're a little more complicated, tend to be, and there's something for a battalion chief actually to do. So after a few years back on the west side, I put in for the 5th Battalion. I was going to be able to walk to work from where I lived, and thought maybe I'd get rid of the car, do the convenience lifestyle thing. and because they had been dangling the training job. The guy that was the training director at the time said, I'm moving on, and I think you're the guy to take my place. But that went on for like 3 years, and I figured this just isn't going to happen. For whatever reason, right? All that stuff's out of your control. You're a battalion chief.
Now, did you want that though, having moved to downtown again and being like in training, but did you want to leave, being a group battalion chief to training?
No, I was interested in the training chief job, or maybe the deputy training chief job. I was looking at that's how I would want to round out my career. Right. And so I had been doing a lot of training during the time when I was a captain and battalion chief. And I was thinking, okay, if there's a spot opens up, in the training division and I'm getting to that, I was 20, 25, I'm getting on, I got made training chief in 2010. So I'm getting on 30 years now, right? On the job. And so I was interested. I let it know I was interested, but I didn't think it was going to happen. It just looked like it wasn't going to happen. So that's when I decided to go back downtown, work closer to home, and get back into the high-rise thing a little bit. Well, I'd no sooner do that than I get the phone call, hey, do you want the training job? So I spent like 2 shifts in the 5th Battalion, and then I got anointed training chief. And that's just kind of how things work in Chicago. It's going to happen, then it ain't going to happen, then all of a sudden it happens. And so my last 3 years, I was in the training division and ran that mess for. Actually, it wasn't a mess at all. I had a really great crew. I was a lucky guy, and so that was my last 3 years there. And then this has already been a long story, but
well, I think you're leading to my favorite thing that you've said before. I don't know if it was our last podcast or when we were hanging out at that pizza place, but you said, I have failed at retirement twice. Is that where you're going to?
Yeah, pretty much. We're there. So coming on 2013, I don't know if I'll explain this right, but for forever and a day in the city, mandatory retirement from the fire department is at age 63. For as long as I can remember, for reasons I don't know, if you make it to your 60th year and you retire, the city would pick up your health care for between that and whenever you hit Medicare age. So starting sometime, well, maybe around 2010, I don't know, but sometime in that era, for whatever reason, they decided to do this, probably just to help attrition, that they made it 55. At 55, if you left, they'd pick up your health care until you hit Medicare age. Well, that's a pretty big incentive, right? Because you're going to have free health care in retirement now. The twist was, for reasons that I don't know and therefore can't explain, the exempt ranks, the non-union ranks, weren't included in that benefit. They were on the police department, but not on the fire department. It's a city of Chicago thing. Who the hell knows? So anyway, in order to get that 55 and out, you have to take the demotion back to battalion chief. and then do your last year as battalion chief, then you can retire and have your health care paid, right? So there was this incentive that I'm staring at, and you never know when that incentive is going to go away. So anybody that's hitting their age 55 has to think about, do they want to make this election? Because once you make it, it's irrevocable.
Right.
So here I am, 3 years into training, 2013. It's my turn. I'm got to get prepared for making this decision. And I thought, well, if I do decide to retire, what do I want to do next? So I started just tossing out resumes to see what was out there, right? I started looking around and I figured, well, the only way to really do this is to send some resumes out and see if anybody is interested in all, and somebody with my background. And lo and behold, I get an offer. I get a job offer. And it's in a suburb 45 minutes outside of Chicago. So it's not like I got to pick up and move across the country. At the time, I'm living in a fully furnished rented apartment. So I don't have any, real estate baggage. I'm not married anymore. I don't have any kids. So making the switch was easy, right? And anyway, so I don't know this chief. I don't know anything about this department, but I know the guy who's the chief of the department next door pretty well. So I call up Jimmy Moore, and I'm still buddies with Jimmy. In fact, I still teach with him for Illinois. Just got to one class with him. Anyway, Jimmy says, "Oh yeah, Pat Mullet? Yeah, he's just my best friend. I kind of know him. We've been friends our whole life." And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to interview with him." So that was interesting, right? Okay, so now I learned something about this guy, and somebody I might want to work with. Right. A couple of days before the interview, I get another phone call from a guy, chief of the Aurora Fire Department, who I work with. In training, I train with him, and he says, "Are you serious about this job, or are you just fishing around?" And I said, "Well, why would you want to know?" And he says, "Because I'm going to be on the interview panel." And I just want to know if you're serious. If you're serious, I'll take you seriously. But if you're not serious, I don't want to recommend you and have you turn down the job. He said, "Just tell me you're serious so I know, why you're here." And I was serious at that point. So I said, "Yeah, I'm serious." Anyway, I interview, I get the job. So I retire. October 1st is my last day in the Chicago Fire Department. October 2nd was my first day on Algonquin Lake in the Hills Fire Protection District. So I failed at retirement. So I'm working for this guy, Pat Mullen, who's become a friend, and I still teach with him today. And Pat tells me straight up that he's going to, do a few years here, because they yanked him out of retirement to solve this problem in Algonquin. And he said, you don't have to commit to this, but if you're interested, in 3 or 4 years, I'll probably be stepping down, and if you want it, let me know so we can prep you properly. And well, it wasn't 3 or 4 years; it was like 2 or 2.5 years. And he pulled the pin, and so he was foolish enough to offer, or they, I should say, the district was foolish enough to offer me the job. I was foolish enough to take it. So I did my last 2.5 years, whatever it was, as chief of that department. On April 1st, 2019. I retired because April 1st was the day I started in Chicago. So since I had complete control, I had promised myself a long time ago that I wouldn't do 40 years on the job. That's just too long. I wouldn't do 40 years. So April 1st was going to be the start of my 40th year. So I figured, okay, that's the date I'm going to retire.
Now, so I understand that there's a chief spot opening up in Tinley Park. Why don't you put in for that one?
No, every time, there's been a lot of things like the Illinois Fire Service Institute. The director there is retired. They've already picked the successor, but when that spot opened up, people were telling me the same thing. Why don't you put it? I said, first off, I'm not qualified, and second off, it sounds like a real job, and I am not interested. I am happy to work. I'm happy to, I just got done. We were out in Colorado. I came back. I spent a week at Sanibel Island with my girlfriend at her daughter's wedding. We got back. I spent the next week training with the Illinois Fire Service Institute in Tinley Park, by the way. Yeah. Doing a leadership development and decision-making class, week-long class. Just got done with that. Starting today, actually, this afternoon, I'm going to go over to UL. We're doing some contract work with UL.
Oh, nice.
Helping them out. And then the week after that, I got recruited to be one of the fire commissioners in the Algonquin Lake and Hills Fire Protection District. So they're doing the hiring process. So the next week I've got to spend 2 or 3 days interviewing candidates for hire in Algonquin. So I'm busy, I'm working, but they're not real jobs. I'm under, it's mostly under my control when I'm going to work, when I'm not going to work. So I'm all over doing that, but anything that requires having to be in a wage slave or principally having to discipline or fire anybody, that's out. I'm not doing any more of that.
So it sounds like you busy career, and you don't know when to quit, so you make yourself busier. And then for those who are listening,
it wasn't the intent, but it kind of worked out there.
Right. So the people are listening. They're like, okay, so now he's just kind of easing into doing just a little bit of this or that. But the truth is, one thing you haven't mentioned is you're the president of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors.
Yeah. So
on top of all that,
well, come on, and you know that I'm the man in charge, but the woman that runs the place is Lee Hubbard, and she does all the work. So quite literally, it's not just a joke. She manages the organization, does a spectacular job. So as I became, ISFSI was not on my radar screen at all during my career to Chicago until I became director of training. And part of that is just my own fault. And part of it is just, I think, the nature of the big city fire departments. It's easy to become insular, right? You have so many resources internally that you seldom look outside your department. And when you do look outside, when Chicago looks outside, they don't look much farther than the Illinois Fire Service Institute, right?
Right.
So, so you tend to be insular or homogenous, whatever you want to call it. And, but the outgoing director recommended to me that I look into the society, become a member. He said that would be a good thing for you to do, and a couple other organizations. And so I joined ISFSI, and then found out that I had a lot of friends that were members that I, because it wasn't on my radar screen. We just started talking. I joined as just, okay, I'll check this out. And then it turned out to be, this is really something I want to be a part of. And this is really something that not only would benefit me in my current career, but, I'm looking at post-career, how can I stay active? How can I be involved? And it became clear pretty quickly that this is an ideal way for an old, tired, can't stand up straight anymore kind of guy like me that can stay engaged and then use what, because at the end of your career, you do have the benefit of a little bit of gravitas and a little bit of experience. And maybe I could leverage that for the society. And as you know, being a member, learn a hell of a lot, because this is the society is the classic exposing yourself to ideas and people and things that you didn't know anything about, and learning much more than you're able to contribute at every encounter because of that dynamic.
Right. Well, for me, and I want to clear something up. So first off, the reason I always brag on the society and say the society is great, not because I work for them. I work for them because the society is so good. Yeah. So, and I wanted to clear something up. I only had like one or two people ask me this through email, is the society asking you to do all these podcasts? And it's absolutely not. The society at no time approached me. Nobody said, hey, listen, since you do a podcast, can you kind of talk us up? I did all this on my own. And to be honest, I had to ask some permissions really to do it. But I think
I can not only vouch for that, but I can also say that when I first heard that you might be interested in doing something, I was a little reluctant.
Yeah.
Not because it's you, but because of podcasts in general. I was like, okay, who's this Jake Barnes guy? I barely know you.
Yeah.
And this aspect of you, I barely know you. I want to know a little bit more about you and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you're exactly right. This was not,
And I'm going to continue to talk to other members, and with my goal, upping our membership, because without a doubt, the best kept secret for fire instructors in this nation is the society, the ISFSI, and it shouldn't be a secret.
Yeah, I have to agree with you if I do say so myself. Yeah. But it's true. We got some great things going on, and guys can, the folks that really jump in and latch onto it. It's like, where have you guys been hiding?
Yes. Yeah, and we got so many classes. So I want to talk a little bit about the classes, but also we have some things that if you're a member, you have access to. So the professional development thing is going on. That's a very exciting thing. And if you're a member, boom, it's right there at your fingertips. And my understanding is this summer we're kicking off a mentor program as well.
Yep. So just, as long, I just brought up the website real quick so I can just give you a rundown, what's coming up in the next month or two. So we've started during the pandemic, like has taught us, and it's not, I shouldn't say taught us, but encouraged us. It was always there, but we really learned to use these online training, opportunities in a much better way than we ever did before. And so one of the things we started doing, the society started to do, was put on some online based classes that our guys could earn CE with, or just for the sake of getting to know things. So coming up in May, I think around on the 20th, 11 steps to creating a culture of firefighter fitness. Right.
And that's with Jim Moss, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
The Jim Moss.
Just got, just some great ideas on how to make that go a little better on your job. We've got a live fire instructor credential class coming up in Dallas. That's one of the premier things that we do, and we'll circle back to that. We got an instructogram, a live selecting anchors for rope rescue webinar. So we do a little bit of that basic training sort of stuff, because, training officers are always looking for new ideas and new ways to approach topics. But we also do stuff like that, creating a culture of firefighter fitness that's meant to support, elevate, help train the trainer, if you will. That's what we try to focus on. Every month we have a happy hour. So we got, where we just get together on one of these platforms, and we get together and talk about whatever is going on in our lives. So I don't know if we have a topic for June yet or not, but sometimes we just BS. We don't have a topic. And then we got another live fire credential coming up in June. And then as you know, we got a grant to do the understanding and fighting basement fire. So we're doing a hands-on basement fire class that's free to whatever department or region, we hope not department, but whatever regional facility wants to host one. We can come in, and it's a day long, really intensive. You're one of our trainers, one of our principal trainers. You know how intensive it is, but yes, really knock down the fire dynamics, knock down the techniques, give some guys some really good takeaways. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Have you used this? Have you used that? Make it line up with the science, the best understanding we have from the work from UL and other agencies. And then, how good the fidelity of the live fire component is going to be is going to depend on the training facility of the host.
Right.
But we had a really good training facility in Colorado, and I think we knocked it out of the park. We had some really great, it's a Class B facility, but that's fine. We had some really good sets and reps on pushing down the basement stairs, flowing water the whole time, and a couple other options when that's not your best first move. So I think we had a great week, or not a week, but it seemed like a week. It was a week for the instructors.
Yeah, it was a lot.
We had a great day training with those. Yeah, we had a great day training with those guys from West Metro, Colorado, and so those are the kinds of things we do. And in addition, we have a library of resources. I think one of the best things we offer is that you get that newly minted training officer or instructor, and even a company officer for the first time. And he's told, I want you, the chief says, I want you to revamp this training program. It's too stale, and you need to reinvigorate it. And the guy goes, great. Now what do I do? Right.
Yeah.
Instead of reinvent the wheel, you can reach out to our membership or to the society itself and say, hey guys, I need a training and we'll give you one. We'll give you that'll cover all your bases, hit all your marks, show you where the flexibility is. I mean, we'll set you up for success. And that's what we're principally designed to do, is that, and then to take the guy that's got the job and needs a little bit of support, needs some new ideas, needs a little mentoring, anything like that, and work that network that we have 1,500 plus members from across the country, and a fair amount from Canada and even Europe, and give you some ideas, give you some help, give you some support. So and
the beauty thing is that if you take one of our classes like the live fire, you get a membership already included in that price. So that's always
so we
nice.
should circle back to that, because I don't know that there's anybody else that consistently delivers to a department or a regional facility a 1403 credential class, right? And it's important, I think, especially when you're talking about live fire training, is to have a third party credential, right? Yes. Credentialing your own people is really not in your best interest. And we provide, I got to tell you, yeah, I'm boasting about our own folks, but the cadre of live fire instructors are as good as they get, and largely because they do it so often. I mean, we just revamped the program during the whole COVID thing to try to address those changes that the shutdown was bringing, and to watch these guys work and to listen to how adept they are, how thoroughly they understand the standard, and how to not just understand the standard, but how to meet the standard, how to train to the standard, how to prep those instructors to make sure that they're not going to make any critical mistakes that are going to get them in trouble. They just do a fantastic job. The feedback from the class is always spectacular. We're very, very proud, justifiably so, of that program. It's one of the things we do the most often. It's one of the things we do best. We also deliver. We have currently a for-fee classroom basement fires class that we're delivering. If you don't have the resources or the time for the hands-on, we still have Principles of Modern Fire Attack, which is based on the UL studies, and just sort of that whole, basically, how do you implement? You got these great ideas. That's nice, and there's this new information, and that's nice. How do I make that work? How do I get the science to the street? How do I make that work for my department? And we will look at your department and your resources and your personnel, come in and deliver that class to help you make the best use of the research that has been coming out, continues to come out. We'll help you work your department through that. So that's Principles of Modern Fire Attack. What am I missing, Jake? Well, we got the new grant for the live fire fire stuff. So that's going on. That's going to be free to anybody that wants to host it. We
got the training credential.
Oh yeah, training officer credential. So that we turned into a completely online class. And again, the feedback has been great. This is not a listen to the lecture, hit the button. I mean, you got to do homework. You got to work pretty hard. Dan's going to make you work pretty hard to succeed in that program, but you will succeed. And there's a lot of places that need to third-party credential their instructors. I can tell you from experience, from looking through the program, this goes way beyond any state certification. I mean, in fact, we're talking to one of the neighboring states to looking at possibly using our training officer credential as their instructor 3 certification in that state.
Oh, wow.
That's how robust the program is. So it's a pretty involved program. And we got a state looking to use it as their instructor's 3 credential. So that's really good. And then we brought in, just in the last year, we've developed two things that I think are going to become the centerpiece of the organization for the broader membership, and that's the professional development matrix, which Mike Richardson and his crew have developed, and the mentoring program with Jesse Arcott and his crew. And I hope you get a chance to talk to both of them, because they can speak to it much better than I can.
Oh, I'd love to.
Because they developed it. They developed those programs. So if you think about it, if you look around, if you were to ask yourself, a young firefighter or a newly minted officer or a newly minted training instructor, okay, great. I sort of kind of got an idea of what I need to know to grow in my profession. How do I move from where I'm at today to where I want to get to? Where do I find that out? And most professions can point you to a spot and say, well, you go here, or a selection of here's, and that's the roadmap. Well, where in the fire service is that roadmap? There really isn't one. Yeah. And not one place, right? And usually a lot of people, the question to how do you become a fire chief is always, well, where do you live? because it varies so much, right?
Right.
And I think that's part of the reason why this has never really been done, is that it really does vary from place to place. What do you need to know to get promoted to lieutenant in Chicago is very different than what you need to know the minute you cross that border and step into a suburb. So what we're trying really hard to do is look at the commonalities, because it's not completely different, right? We're focusing on the commonalities so that while the guy's trying to figure out what's unique to me locally, he can work on what isn't unique to, what's universal in the fire service, and map out that, okay, I'm going to have to do this amount of work over the course of my career or segment of my career. And then it makes it easier to get organized and start working on it. And there's a lot of resources that we're linking to, not just this is what you need to do, but this is how you accomplish it. This is what you need to read. This is what you need to study. These are the classes that are available. and as we develop this thing and broaden it out, I mean, we'll just have this information library, because a lot of people have already started to post their SOGs, their training protocols, their remediation programs. We get a lot of questions on our forums about, okay, I got a driver. How do I remediate my drivers that have accidents? Who's got a program that does this, so I don't have to build it from scratch, and all those kinds of resources we're going to have on that matrix.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, which is always a huge pain for somebody in a different department. Like your chief says, okay, we need to look at, for example, the remediation of a driver. Okay, you could sit there and do all the research, and you could take all that time, or you could just, be a member and get access to that stuff immediately.
And you get it, and you pick what's good for you, right? And discard what's not. But I've always found it easier to edit somebody else's curriculum than to build my own. Right?
Yes.
And so why build your own? Edit somebody else's. We'll give you somebody else's, grab it, or not just somebody, but somebody's else's.
Right.
And use what works for you. And we'll even, through the mentor program, teach you how to do that, or guide you through the process of how to do that. So that takes us to the second initiative we got going, and we're beta testing it now. We were hoping to launch it in the spring, but the guys that are developing it wanted to do a little bit of more work on it. So we're going to stand up an online mentoring program where you're not limited to looking around you in your department or your area or your state and saying, who can I get to help mentor me through whatever. You get to look at the whole country, and indeed the whole world, because this is going to be internet based. So there's that, right? So let's see it, and it could be mentoring for career development, or it could be mentoring for a specific purpose. Like, I got to develop a new training program. Who can hold my hand as I'm trying to do that?
Right.
Or I got to do an officer development program. I got to do a leadership development program. I got to do something that I'm just not comfortable with. Can somebody guide me through that process? So it can be task specific, or it can be the broader career development sort of mentoring that many of us have had the benefit from. So we'll be able to hook up the mentors with the mentees. And then, because we're doing this online and we're doing it through a formal structure, first and foremost, the mentors are all going to be vetted. So you're not going to be rolling the dice with, not knowing, just because somebody thinks they've been around, they repeated 1 year 20 times and they think that's 20 years of experience, right? We're going to try to weed that guy out of the process, and and hook you up with a really good mentor. And then not only that, but there's going to be enough structure and enough oversight that we're going to know if that relationship was successful or not. We're not going to insert ourselves in the relationship, but the mentor has to give us feedback. The mentee has to give us feedback. And if those relationships aren't successful, we're going to know about it so that we can do something about the mentors or the program itself or whatever. So there's going to be enough oversight to help ensure that the relationships are successful. We're not going to just put you together and hope everything goes well.
Right. The society is really good at being dynamic. It's always reevaluating, always taking what works and making it better, taking what doesn't work and either revamping or cutting. It's not a stagnant society by any means. I mean,
and it has a lot to do with it's member driven, right? You got to put up $1.25 every year to be a member, and people that do that expect to have some input into the organization, and
sure.
And they do. And when folks step up, like Jesse did and Mike did and others, to do this kind of work, this was very much a bottom up. These two most recent programs, very much a bottom-up driven thing that we need to get this done, and this is something we need to offer if we're going to meet our mission. So I'm really excited for both of them, and they're going to succeed based on member participation. That's the other thing that I like about particularly the professional development matrix. That's only going to be as good as the submittals into the matrix are, and those are going to largely come from the membership. So. It's going to be great.
Oh, by the way, I'm stealing that 1 year repeating 20. I love that.
This is a true story. So my first officer, I shouldn't say the first, because I spent this really short time on an engine and then managed to flip over to a truck in a busy part of the city. But I always think of Tommy Barrett as my first officer. And he was from day one. There was no "because I said so" at truck 22 or engine 83.
Right.
the officers wouldn't stand for that. They wouldn't do it themselves, and they wouldn't stand for it from the firefighters. It was always, why'd you do that? Why'd you do that? And one time Tommy asked me, why'd you do that? And I said, well, because I just got to give him a name. John said so. He said, well, why would you listen to John? He's like chuckling. Why would you listen to John? I said, well, John's got 20 years on the job. Pulls me over up to the corner. He says, look, there's guys with 20 years on the job, and there's guys with one year repeated 20 times. John falls in the category number 2. I'm glad that you respect the seniority and all that, but do not blindly follow. It's a big, big lesson for me, right?
Yeah.
Experience, time on the job doesn't equal experience, and experience doesn't equal knowledge and understanding, right? And boy, to have that lesson in your first, it had to be in my first couple of years, right? To have that lesson that early in your career from a guy that really was interested in taking care of you. That was powerful stuff. I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. Experience and seniority are 2 different animals.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
One of the things I remember what I was going to bring up. So a lot of the programs that the society develops, like the 1403, which I'm a little biased because I'm one of the instructors. I love that class. The new 1-day fire hands-on. It's not like we took UL's stuff and implemented it into our program. It was a hand-in-hand situation where the society and UL work together. Yeah,
we're really fortunate that we have as strong a relationship as we do with the ULFSRI. I've been on that, and that relationship started before I became an officer with the society, just so we're clear. Mm-hmm. But I also sit on the advisory board for ULFSRI. So I know those guys personally and have for well over a decade. And when we're putting in a grant, we've always talked to them. When it started with PMFA, Principles of Modern Fire Tech, and we went to you and said, this is what we want to do. We like your work. We want to work on implementing it. Here's the structure we're looking at. Are we headed in the right direction? Yeah, you're headed in the right direction. Make sure you pay attention to this, that, and the other thing. Okay. And then we'd work on it a little more and come back to them. So there's been a collaboration with you on developing all the programs that we've delivered in the last dozen years or so to make sure that we got the science right. Is right. Really the biggest point, right? They don't get in the way of how we deliver it or what we're saying or what the program looks like, those kind of things. We're instructors, we take care of that, but we want to make sure that we're delivering their part of the information correctly. So it's always been vetted principally by Dan or one of his team when he can't get to it. But we always make sure that
Dan Madrikowski.
Yeah, Dan Madrikowski. We always make sure that we got the science right before we put it out on the street. We don't want to be misinterpreting things. We don't want to be overstating or understating things. We want to make sure that we got that dialed in correctly. There's always the risk, right? Individual instructors sometimes spin things one way or the other. And like any other training organization, we've had to reach out and guide some of our instructors once in a while. I don't sweat that because it comes back to us. We evaluate it. We know about it. You've been in training organizations. I've been in training organizations for a long, long time. That is always the case. You always have that guy that veers off the program. It starts, and you got to bring back in. This is the program, right? All right. But we have the benefit of being able to have ready access to the source of all that information and not somebody's interpretation of that information. So I think that's really helped our programs be on target because we're getting the science part of it from the source, without a doubt.
Right. I want to end on this one thing, this one particular story. And so I'm sort of fanboy over the heavy hitters in our industry, right? The people that write the articles, that do the teaching, do keynote speaking, stuff like that. So I always call these people landscapers or changing the landscape of the fire service. So everyone that I've met so far, 100%, they don't see themselves as these heavy hitters. They don't see themselves as anything other than a firefighter. That's all it is. So you fall into this category. So when we were going to Denver, got a list of everybody that I'm going to be teaching with, right? So, there's Peter Van Dorpe, there's Forrest Streeter, there's Tony Carroll, Brad French, Brian Seitz, on and on and on. So I was like, wow, this is, I just need to shut up the whole time I'm there because there's going to be some good knowledge. Again, Nobody has any ego, you especially. I mean, no ego whatsoever. But I got to tell you, the coolest thing that ever happened, we were there the night after we delivered the program to South Metro, and everybody's kind of loose now, right? We're at that Chicago restaurant, which I learned Chicago pizza and deep dish. It is cut in squares, it's thin, and if you can roll it, the dough is way too soft. It's got a crunch. All right, I learned that from you.
But anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So, but the coolest thing was we're all sitting around at different tables, and everybody's having their own little conversation, having a good time. And at your table, you, Tony, started it was Tony Carroll's TCBC from DC, was his birthday. And so you guys are just kind of in the corner chatting like this. And then I hear a word, I hear ventilation. I kind of stopped talking to, I'm fortunate enough, I'm sitting, by Brad French, and I got Gilbert Pedroza, and we all just kind of stop, and we just slowly turn, and we're listening for almost an hour. Pete Van Dorpe and Tony Carroll talking about ventilation then and now and the future, and fire tack then, now, and in the future. And people pay good money to hear these kind of conversations with you heavy hitters. And again, I know you don't think you are. I definitely know Tony doesn't think he is, but it was one of the coolest night. And me and Brad, like Brad had his face in his hands, and then so did I. And Brad leaned over, he goes, "Isn't this the coolest fucking thing ever?" And I'm like, yeah, people pay a lot of money to hear this. And you guys just went on and on and on. It was amazing. That night could have gone forever for me.
And I'll tell you what, here's, thank you, first off. But that's one of the benefits of, and for me, at FDIC, which is my favorite show to go to, right? Mm-hmm. Not enough attendees take advantage of this part of it, right? Is because all the instructors at FDIC hang out someplace, and you can go find them in a bar, or even just after they're on, right? You can follow them until they sit down somewhere, and you can have that same conversation. Many of us are reluctant to do that. We think like, oh, I can't bother them or whatever, but every last one of them is more than happy to just sit down with you and have that conversation. And once you start doing it, or if you see somebody having a conversation with one of the heavy hitters,
right,
you can walk up and listen in on it, right? And then possibly participate in it. You can do the same thing when you go to FDIC, or really any other conference, but FDIC is the 800-pound gorilla, so you might as well go there now that they're having it again, thank God.
Right.
But yeah, I got to tell you, one of the lessons the society taught me, right, and working with those guys and being at FDIC taught me, I have the benefit, and I have an obligation, and I think Tony feels the same way. You come from a large metropolitan department. You were lucky enough to have a lot of experience there. You owe something, right? People are going to listen to you because you're from there, not because you know your job, but because you're from there. All right. So that gives you this enormous responsibility to, you better know what the heck you're talking about. So before you open up your mouth and stick your foot in it, right, count to 10 or think a little bit. And really the work with you well, and these were all experiences very late in my career, the work with you well, presenting and keynoting at FDIC, and then the work with the society, teaches you to be humble, right? Because you just don't know it all, and a lot of times you misspeak or you overstate your case. Mm-hmm. And it was very hard at first, to be honest with you, because I'm Chicago and I know what I'm doing, but we often overstate our case, and it behooves you to learn something new, to be uncomfortable and all that. But it's I really do think it's a big responsibility coming from a large department, because that gives you a reputation that you probably haven't really earned, that you have to, right? You have to live up to.
You got to live up to it.
And you got to be pretty careful about what you say and when you say it. So I hope I managed to do that. Sometimes when we're in those situations, when I know I'm amongst friends and we're pretty well lubricated, you might overstay once in a while. But I've learned not to do it when I'm lecturing, and I've learned not to do it on podcasts, I hope. So.
Well, I should also mention I had Forrest Reader to my left. So this was kind of like a big deal. And I kept thinking to myself, and Brad French kind of reinforced it, like, people pay for this. And I was absolutely 100% sure I wasn't. First off, I was terrified if you guys asked me anything, because I felt like there was nothing I could really add, but also I just wanted to just let it go, just kind of let it go. But yeah, I had Chief Forrest Reader to my left. I had Tony Carroll, Pete Van Dorpe right there, had Seth Barker. I mean, I had, Brad French, I think Brian had to leave. Zeitz had to leave.
Yeah, he had to go home early.
Yeah, I had just had great instructors all around. I was just listening and it just blew me away. And I think that's really it's a great example of the society, the level and quality of instructors and the ability to share. That's exactly, that just kind of hit me. That's a great example. You've got these guys that the 4 or 5 days we spent together, you never once, not one time said, well, this is how Chicago does it. This is how we're going to do it. You're like, I wonder how other people do it compared to what we do. But that's a great example for the society. Imagine sitting around and having all these heavy hitters have conversations that you normally just read or have to pay for.
And they're available to you anytime you want to reach out. I've never seen anybody not get an answer to a question.
Absolutely. Chief Van Dorpe, I appreciate your time on this podcast. I really do. And I look forward to the next time we get to teach together.
Yeah, me too, Jake. It was fun. It's what it's all about.
I appreciate it.
Take good care.
You too. I hope you enjoyed that podcast as much as I did. I tell you what, Chief Van Dorpe is bigger than life. It's funny, though, because he is humble as they come. He is quick to give other people's credit for their hard work, but he's absolutely the last guy to say, hey, look at me, look what I did. He is all about the fire service. He sets a pretty high standard for all of us to achieve, but I guarantee you he'd be the first one to help us do that and surpass it. He's a fantastic dude. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I got a new podcast coming out in a couple of weeks, and have fun, stay safe, enjoy the job, man. It's the best job in the world.